Welcome to another TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja, and with me is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi. Hi.
It's there's been an interesting development this week in Australia.
Yes.
A wonderful woman I think she's in Perth. Karyn Lisignoli, I think. So she was hired as CEO of Girl Guides Western Australia. She was in the role for 10 days or something ridiculous. She made a public tweet to Kath Deves.
I didn't know Kath was implicated in this scandal. Yeah.
She was just asking for clarification, like, can Girl Guides legally base their organization on biological sex? How do we change our constitution or something like that? Mm-hmm. And she got fired.
That's so crap. I'm not surprised. Is she going to appeal?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I had a chat with her just before we started recording. So I reached out to her. We've been emailing back and forth, and I finally got to chat with her today. That was something I didn't ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
I keep getting distracted by my own eyebrows. If anyone's noticed that I look like I've been to the trans school of makeup, I've got henna on my eyebrows and I can't wash them off for 24 hours. So Stassja starts laughing. It's because of my eyebrows. I can't even look at myself. I don't know. I've lost count of the women who have legitimately asked that question, just an innocent question that makes common sense, like, we're a women-only organisation, can we exclude men? And I've lost count of the women who have been penalised for asking that question.
Wow. Yeah.
And cancelled or lost their jobs or whatever. And obviously, if it's we're talking about young girls and teenage girls and younger, then it's very important that parents and other people know if there are men going to be with those girls. Like, it's common sense. I mean, so why are they losing their jobs over something that is just safeguarding? It's normal to ask those questions.
That's right. And I just remembered I got an article published, my first ever article published.
Yay!
By The Spectator. And I was writing about, what trans school policies mean for girls, especially. And I forgot to include in there, which I probably should have, was it doesn't only apply to students, it applies to teachers as well.
That's right.
Right. And which is part of the Girl Guides problem. As we saw in the UK, a trans-identified male got into a Girl Guides leadership position and posted images of himself on Twitter in fucking dominatrix gear.
With guns.
So same issue for Girl Guides here in Australia. If you're going to open it up to anyone with a woman gender identity, then, you're opening the door to predators.
And there's even this sort of microaggression as well, because I was spoken about in a meeting regarding the area that I work in this week. One of my colleagues told me that they were discussing whether it was fair to the one non-binary individual that attends a group that I'm involved with, that I'm an out public TERF, and whether that would be a bad thing. We're a women-only group. We're a women-only recovery group, a peer support group. And one person identifies as non-binary. And the tone of the conversation was that our entire group should fold to the wishes of this person, even though I've been involved in this group from its inception. And, I was really pleased with how the conversation played out, in that people said, oh, look, Angela's a women's rights activist. She's not a transphobe, and she will respect her pronouns by not using them and calling her a name. Like, I was defended, but the fact they even had that conversation. So all these conversations about women that are potentially damaging to their careers and to their reputations and integrity for nothing wrong, for stating reality. These conversations are going on in every single workplace at the moment. Mm-hmm. And people aren't speaking up about it because they're afraid. They're afraid to defend somebody whose integrity is being questioned. And there's no other accusations apart from transphobia. And we all know how difficult it is to determine what transphobia is, because everything is transphobic. Reality is transphobic. So yeah, it's macro and micro level aggression towards women who don't subscribe to this ideology.
Wow. Gosh, the LGBT plus lobby has so much money. Why aren't they setting up peer support groups for women that are non-binary to,
Well, that the man that attends the thing that made me peak trans and start being an angry public TERF, the man who attends those has the option of male and LGBT groups, but he chose a women-only recovery service because that was the ultimate validation for him. And he deliberately wanted to center himself in a group of women. That's the only reason, because he has all those LGBT, I can't even say it anymore, the alphabet, he has all of those groups. Now, the state government is taking money on one hand from women's domestic violence services and women-only services. They're all being stripped bare and boasting about how much money he's throwing at LGBT groups because they're so vulnerable, and it's a hostile climate out there for trans activists and all sorts of stuff. And yet we're all just there going, what? Why give them more money? And the thing is, he's giving money to private entities. He's not actually supporting charities or supporting things that are sort of grassroots. He's throwing money into private entities which offer dubious services, in the same way that, say, JobKeeper is supposed to help unemployed people find a job, but they get money for attempting to find someone a job without actually getting them a job. It's that same kind of government rort where they're actually just paying their mates. They're not actually helping the people that need it, because the people that need support in the trans community, or who are struggling to come out because, maybe a lesbian who everyone's telling is trans, they're not going to get psychological support. They're going to get transition.
Yeah. Very sad. The Victorian government, maybe a week or two ago, released their 10-year plan.
I couldn't look at it. I read about one page.
LGBT people in Victoria. I haven't read it yet either, but I'm going to have to, just to see what they're on about. But, there was one thing I do remember hearing was there was money in there for legal services for LGBT, right? And you think about what happened to Feminist Legal Clinic up in Sydney.
Or Beth Rep,
yeah. It's just outrageous. We've actually got Anna Kerr from Feminist Legal Clinic coming on shortly to have a chat with us, so that'll be good.
No, I read little bits of it, and basically what I read, in my interpretation of it, was the erasure of sex as a protected characteristic and having it replaced with gender identity.
Yeah.
There was, and it was all about the TQ. Mm-hmm. It was, and nothing grassroots, nothing individually for lesbians. I read a few pages, but I was just irate at the female erasure and, the devastation towards, and also the hyperbole about mental illness in the trans community, and that the solution for that, that they offer is, more mental health support. But, it's all mental health support geared towards transitioning and sustaining their mental illness and their delusions, and that's not a holistic approach. It's not a holistic health approach. You know, the rest of the public health system is starving. Like, we've been in lockdowns because it's not coping. All elective surgeries have been cancelled. And yet, you know, the government, our state government, is throwing money at transgender orgs and at the Royal Children's Hospital, which is mostly self-supporting. And, you know, it's just crazy. What else was I going to say? Something on that thing. No, I've forgotten. Sorry. I'm just distracted by my own eyebrows going like this. Yeah. I only got it done because I'm lazy and like I don't want to put makeup on and my eyebrows disappear. So about once a month I go and get them done. And I didn't sort of mean to clash with appearing in public. But clown brows. No one can ever accuse me of being so vain that I won't be seen looking like a dickhead.
Yeah. On the you know, the 10-year plan, tied in with that is this $1 million Pride Centre in St Kilda. St Kilda seems to be like the heartland of trans here in Melbourne.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, guess how many menopause clinics there are in Melbourne?
None. One.
Jean Hales.
Yeah.
And guess how many gender clinics are in Victoria?
I don't know.
At last time I counted, including satellite clinics in regional areas, 33.
You know, you just reminded me, I watched an American woman, she runs a YouTube channel, A Slightly Twisted Female, and she just did a couple of episodes where she talked about menopause and the fact that these young girls that are going on testosterone or you know, getting hysterectomies, they're being put into early menopause, and there are so many health complications from that.
Well, I'm postmenopausal. I went through a horrific menopause. You know, I've had 4 kids. Like, you know, I know my body very well, and menopause was horrific for me. I had all sorts of illnesses that I would never believe were caused by hormonal imbalance. I had like a stomach ulcer and gastritis, and you know, and I'm a healthy living person. I had like the hot flushes were out of control. Like, I'm talking, you know, not just 1 or 2 or 3 a day. They were waking me up in the night. They were non-stop. I had also other, you know, like I had, you know, poor mental health because I wasn't sleeping because my sleep was interrupted by hot flushes. You know, so I ended up going on HRT under a specialist doctor, and I really struggled to find the right dosage, and I had really bad side effects if the right dose wasn't right. And I said to my doctor, I said, you know, this is really affecting me quite badly. What is it like for people that change gender? And she said, good point. You're only on 10% of the hormones that they would be taking.
Wow. Whoa. What?
Yeah, and that was early before I would have completely peaked transgender. But you know, that was it, just having a casual conversation, trying to tease it out, because I, you know, back then I was always trying to get a little bit of information from these specialists on how these drugs work and the impact that they'd have on young people's bodies. Now, you know, I'm going through menopause and having hormone treatment as a fully formed female who's undergone having kids and all that stuff. Imagine what it's doing to bodies that haven't yet finished puberty.
Yeah, it's just unconscionable.
And what it does to this also, like that, you know, any woman knows that certain times of the month, sometimes you're extra tired, or you have mental health stuff. But can you imagine the rate of hormones that they're on, and the sharp drops and highs and lows, and the natural hormones and the synthetic hormones fighting each other? Can you imagine what that does to one's mental health? No wonder they're all crazy and raging and angry.
Even more than that, A Slightly Twisted Female was talking about how early menopause, like women who go into menopause in their early 40s, that's considered early. There is a whole lot of scientific evidence, medical evidence, that it impacts your cognition, the way that your brain works. And if you go into, like, there's a high risk if you're in early menopause that in 10 years time you're going to be I can't remember, I don't think it was Alzheimer's, but it was like, you know, conditions like that affect the brain and affect your ability to function. And now, and she was saying that, you know, one good thing that's going to come from this whole trans movement and what's happening to girls and young women is that we're going to have a whole lot of new scientific evidence around what early menopause does to women, if anyone's studying it, that is.
Yeah, because women's stuff doesn't get funded.
Yeah, shocking. Just
yeah,
shocking.
that's another thing that doctors have said to me, you know, because of my menopause stuff, you know, I'd say, why? And they'd say, well, we don't know, because there's no funding to, you know, there's no funding for a cure for some of the most acute menopause symptoms. I mean, I read something last year that said, you know, the billions of dollars that, you know, perimenopause and menopause cost, you know, governments and industry. You would think that someone would fund some exploration into, you know, now that women have to work through their menopause and they're having children later, so there's the additional pressures. You're not just, you know, retiring and dealing with menopause on your own. You've got all these other pressures. You'd think someone would find the time to invest in women's health, considering such a large part of the population is perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal, and no one seems to give a shit. They're throwing all their money at transactivism, which kind of leads us back to, you know, the arguments that there are big, you know, nefarious financial interests at the root of all of this. Because there's no money in older women, apparently. You know, we're sort of, unless they're trying to sell us plastic surgery or something like that, or Botox, but there's big money to be made in, you know, hormones for little young people and kids. And, you know, in Australia, with parental permission, you can go on cross-sex hormones at 16 if you've got your parents' permission. Otherwise, it's 18. So you can have your breasts removed at 15. You can go on cross-sex hormones, and you can even get on puberty blockers around the age of, you know, with your parents' permission, just for the purpose of delaying puberty, so you can later go on cross-sex hormones. You can go on them as early as 10 or 11.
Someone just sent me an article this morning. It was on 9 Honey. You know how?
Yep.
Yeah, 9.
I shouldn't poo-poo them. They published something that I wrote a little while ago, so I don't. On your 9 Honey, you're all right. Yeah.
Why do they have to call it honey, though? You know,
because it's a feminine, you know, and sweet, and it's for women. It's a women's channel.
Anyway, it was about a mother who was fundraising to get her daughter's breasts removed. And I assume it was an Australian one. I'm going to have a proper look at it once we jump off. But, you know, it's just crazy out there. Parents, oh God, parents are harming their kids.
What sort of parent would do that? To me, that's the, like, you know, I can't understand how a parent would want their child to undergo unnecessary major surgery. I don't understand it.
That's right.
And you know, after breast cancer, getting your breast removed, you quite often have women quite often have problems with lymphedema.
Oh.
Like, it's really, really common after cancer surgery, and it's no different if you have them removed for cosmetic reasons, that because it affects all your glands and stuff up into your armpit and from your breast, because your breast's attached to all the rest of your body, you know. Right. And yeah, so, you know, they have problems with fluid retention, and that leads on to other really serious illnesses that can come from, you know, lack of circulation and, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's not as simple as, oh, my breasts have been removed and, you know, there's no other health complications, but it creates health complications. Yeah. And I'm sure that, you know, these people are given like 25,000 pages of this may happen. And I'm not sure they're actually reading it, because I can't understand how any parent would allow their children to take such a huge hit to their health. I can't understand it.
That's it. Our guest has just joined the waiting room, so I'm going to bring her in.
Excellent.
So today we have Anna Kerr from Feminist Legal Clinic joining us. She is also the country contact here in Australia for the Women's Declaration International.
Yeah.
Hey, Anna, just need to turn your audio on, please. Thanks. It's all right. we're shocking with the tech.
Oh, we love it. I love it when it's chaotic. Yeah.
Hi, Angela.
Hi.
I think it's the first time I've seen you.
Yeah, really. I've got henna on my eyebrows, so I look like a clown today.
All right.
Welcome, Anna. Thanks for joining us. Now, you've been at this a long time, the transgender wars. Can you tell us a bit about like how you became aware that this was a serious problem here in Australia that needed to be addressed?
Yeah, it was a growing realization. I think I had no idea until about 2013. And I sort of joined a women's organisation, and while I was there, I kind of had the impression that I felt that they were male, but nobody else could see it. Then, yeah, I thought maybe it was just me, but I guess it became an issue when I realised that they were trying to change the constitution for this women's organisation to be, instead of for women, that it would be for people who live as women, which was kind of weird. And yeah, it was all very strange. But then after that, it was every woman's organisation I was in. It was happening that there would be an individual who was a male who wanted to become the convener or the chair of the group. So, you know, initially I just thought it wasn't a big issue because I thought the numbers are so small. I mean, I kind of thought it was nonsense. I didn't really have to peak trans because I kind of thought it was nonsense from the start. But I thought it was a very small minority group and that feminists really shouldn't, you know, be bothered by them. You know, but then I suddenly realized that it was actually a front for dismantling feminist groups and women's groups, and, you know, by infiltrating them, dominating them and dismantling them. And one of the early examples was I was in a women's working group for the New South Wales Greens. Mm-hmm. And there was a sort of discussion happening online about, you know, what issues, what campaigns we should prioritise. And somebody said, abortion is not a women's issue. And I was kind of waiting for the kind of laughter, but instead there was a bit of a silence. It basically shut down the conversation for quite a while. And then the apologies started, women apologising for their insensitive use of language and talking about it as a women's issue. And I just was blown away. And then not long after that, the next thing was that they voted in a convener who was a male, and he was not even using his female persona for business. He was still using his male persona for business.
Wow.
Because otherwise he would suffer discrimination, you know. And he hadn't had any surgery or anything because he had fragile health, and so he was really not even passing at all. But the women were gushing in their acclaim, in their desire to be, you know, progressive and inclusive and all of that, just absolutely gushing, except a whole bunch of women just silently unsubscribed from the list, you know. And I think that's the problem, is that women don't put up a fight because they're not confrontational, they don't want to. And so the Greens lost a whole lot of women at that stage. But there was no, I mean, I made a bit of a fanfare. I said, oh, it was a travesty, and then left the group. But later on I rejoined because I realised that if we just back off and they win. Yes. That's what they want. So you do have to actually stay and, you know, put up some resistance, and you can do it politely, but you won't get met. It won't be polite what you get back. But yeah, wow. So that was the beginning, I think. Yeah.
It blows my mind how far down the path the Greens are with this stuff. And the left in general, like the left is meant to be about material reality, and on this issue it's just fallen out the window. They
all claim to be socialists, and I'm one of them, and yet they don't have basic class analysis, like not at all. You know, they don't see women as an oppressed class. I'm like, that's Marx, you know, Marx would be rolling in his grave. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I haven't I'm still a member of the Greens, and I can tell you that there is a resistance, but it's underground. Because, I mean, unfortunately, I think that the Greens has been infiltrated because it's very easy to infiltrate by people who have some very wrong motives. And unfortunately, the nature of the Greens is such that everybody is wanting to be very compassionate and kind and understanding. And that's why it's so easy for them to be won over, because that is how this is presented. And I think the challenge is trying to demonstrate to Greens members that this is not kind. I mean, number one, I don't actually think it's ever kind to lie to people. You know, I do think there's a place for sometimes having to be a little bit brutally honest, because in the long term, I don't actually think it's right to mislead people, even if you're doing it because you don't want to hurt their feelings. I'm someone, I'd rather people were a bit, you know, told me the truth than told me pretty lies. So, I mean, so even, you know, I've had to deal with a lot of clients who are delusional, you know, and have mental health problems and this sort of thing. And I think there is a way of being kind, but not misleading people about, you know, so pretending that you believe that somebody's a woman when they're clearly not. I think it's just dishonest. And I think people, I don't know, I think they deceive themselves in their effort, in their desire to be kind. You know, we kind of got this sort of mass delusion happening. I think deep down, a lot of people know this is nonsense. And I think they should try to find another way of being kind that doesn't involve falsehood. So if we could show that, and I think all we need to do to demonstrate this is not kind is just look at all these young people who are mutilating themselves and being sterilized, and surely people can see that there's a profit motive involved, and there's nothing kind about spreading this ideology into schools and into popular culture, where young people are really hurting themselves. And you know, we're going to have to answer to them in the future, and we're the adults. You know, they will blame our generation for letting this happen. Because they really were too young to know better, but we know better. So what the hell?
That's right.
I'm actually really proud that, you know, my legacy may be these dodgy videos, because I have 3 daughters and a son, and you know, I'm really proud of standing up for women and kids. I'm really proud of it. And, you know, if someone said to me now, and I'm 52, said, okay, what are one of your greatest achievements? And I would now consider, you know, being one of the first women in Australia to put their name to public turfery as one of my greatest achievements, you know, because it's making a difference. And, you know, even if this drags on for another 30 years after I'm gone, my kids, you know, are completely embarrassed by me now, but they might look back and go, hey, mum had a point, you know. Mum fought for us. Mum fought for women and kids.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I can sleep well at night.
Yeah.
I think I'm happy to be, if someone could convince me I was wrong. And I mean, I read, you know, both sides of the argument. And if I found something that was convincing, I can change. You know, I've made mistakes before. I make a mistake, I change. I can't see it. I just can't see that there's any factual basis for this. What I do see is a lot of unscrupulous marketing.
But I think for me, I was just saying to Stassja before, I've been contacted a lot in the last couple of weeks by people in either in the public eye through their work, or in working for government jobs, or working as psychologists, GPs, you know, endocrinologists, university professors, whatever. And they want to speak up, but the intimidation from their own workplace that's causing them to be quiet, that's on one level that keeps them quiet. And then the other thing that someone mentioned to me this week, and this is a person who accidentally misgendered a serial killer, that she was made aware of her heinous sin by receiving abusive emails. They were so abusive that she wanted to do something about it, but not so much that the police would take them seriously because they're from anonymous accounts. But there's that double level of intimidation that forces women to just go, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be targeted. I don't want to be demonized. And they don't feel that because the legal system's captured, because it is, then they don't feel safe to even report it.
No, legal system, health system, it's all captured. I mean, they've done a lot of it by stealth, but yeah.
All of it, I reckon. Daniel Andrews' Labor government here in Victoria, who introduced self-ID with no consultation with any women's groups. You know, he's got blood on his hands, and every second day he's posting pro-trans stuff on all his social media feeds. You know, he's a trained lawyer. He knows the difference between the sexes, but all of a sudden he doesn't.
I really wonder about this. I really wonder, is it dishonesty? I mean, has he really managed to convince himself? I mean, I guess there's such a weight of authority by now saying that, you know, this is all good. And a lot of people, it seems to me, a lot of people really are completely guided by authority figures. It's like those psychology tests, you know, that where they showed that people do anything. A person puts on a white lab coat and people elect, you know, because that's the majority of people are guided by authority rather than exercising a bit of their own judgment. You know, they don't have any faith in themselves. It's been extraordinary to watch this. I mean, people that I kind of had some respect for, I realized no, they really can't think for themselves. They really need to be told what to think. And so, I mean, I look at the group of TERFs as the, you know, as a very, it's interesting what a minority group, but what an important minority group this is in our culture. You know, what would we do without rad femmes?
That's it. Anna, can you, I'm pretty sure a lot of our subscribers will already know the story of what happened to Feminist Legal Clinic, but could you go through it quickly for us?
Oh yeah, you mean the end bit? Well, I mean, it's not ended yet.
Well, even, you know, what was the kind of work that you were doing, and the fact that, you know, you got defunded in a way. Yeah,
not that we ever had much funding, but we did have a lovely office from the City of Sydney Council. We'd managed to secure that back in 2017, which was when we incorporated and we had charity status, and we were set up as a community legal centre. We were staffed entirely by volunteers, and we obtained an accommodation grant from the City of Sydney and got this lovely office, which was a 5-year lease, which would have expired this current year. But, you know, I suppose in the normal course of events, we would have hoped that it would have been extended. But anyhow, last year, well, I think 2020, we were contacted. Council had been very happy with us up till then. And then we had that event. We helped organise the event at University of Sydney, where we had the panel speakers. Some people might remember this event. Bronwyn Winters hosted it, and we had a number of speakers who were, I think, all lesbian young women, and one was a detransitioner talking about her experiences. And now that event, and it was disrupted by kind of nasty protests, various things. Police were called. But then it was after that event that the Gender Centre, Eloise Brooke at the Gender Centre, sent an email to council. I mean, we didn't know this originally. I've only found this out through doing a GIPA request, which is like freedom of information. But since I have done that request and I've got all the correspondence, and it was just a single email from the Gender Centre. So that it's not like we've ever had any clients complain or members of the public complain, nothing. The Gender Centre sent an email, a short email to the City of Sydney, and that was enough to make them jump and to contact us and to sort of say, you know, your tenancy is going to be terminated unless you basically censor your website, because we also have a news digest, which is really just posting articles on this issue. Well, actually all sorts of issues of relevance to women, human rights of women and girls, but including the issue of the impact of, you know, aggressive trans activism on the rights of women. And they wanted us to take that down. They wouldn't really specify. We tried to enter into a bit of, you know, they specified 3 posts, I think, only, and we kind of hid those from view to placate them. But then they wouldn't go on and identify any others that were a concern or enter into anything about that. But they basically also said that we had to stop doing our work in the area of, I think they call it the women's sex-based rights movement, which is what it is, I guess. And as I'm country contact for the Women's Human Rights Campaign, now known as Women's Declaration International, that was a pretty big call, because a lot of our membership are women who feel very passionately about this subject. So they were pretty much telling us that we had to censor our activity, and yeah, really problematic. So we didn't. And we did try to engage in dialogue with them on that, but no, it wasn't going to happen. We let our membership and supporters know, and hundreds of women have written personal letters to the City of Sydney to protest this. One of the letters had over 900 signatures, and then Women's Forum, without our asking, because we're a very different organisation obviously from them, but they put up a petition that got over 3,000 signatures. But anyhow, none of it made any difference. And the City of Sydney, the councillors at the meeting where they, took on the recommendation that we should be evicted, didn't even acknowledge this huge amount of correspondence that they'd all received, because most of these people had written and sent copies to all the councillors. None of it made any difference. And I think what that tells you is how powerful the trans lobby is, that one email versus literally hundreds, thousands, if you count the ones with multiple signatures, didn't make any difference at all. So, I'd like to thank all the women who did write, and I've been getting that correspondence redacted. I've put a handful up on the website of people that I've checked that it's okay, but I'd really like to post more, because there were so many wonderful letters written, and it just didn't make any difference. And so I'm sort of someone's kind of been redacting the identifying details for me, and I'm thinking about putting them up so that people can see what a huge amount of support there was and how it didn't get any acknowledgement, really.
I watched that session with Sydney City Council. I think I tuned in about halfway through Janet Fraser speaking, and what really stood out, I mean, one of the women that got on and spoke against you, she had short hair, and I'm guessing she probably identifies as non-binary or something like that. But anyway, and this is what I've noticed about the debate as a whole, is there's this really vindictiveness coming from women that are pro-trans. Like, they get a kick out of punishing other women for having wrong opinions. Do you think that's part of it?
I think they've convinced themselves that they're in the right, and it's virtue signaling, and they're kind of in their mind, they've decided we're kind of some bunch of bigots, and if they get a chance, they'll try to, this is what I find they'll always try to make out that you're right wing, that you're affiliated, and you're also racist and homophobic. It doesn't matter that there's no factual basis for that at all, because what's very important to them to sort of cast you as the baddie. And this is sort of very simplistic thinking. Again, I think what it reflects on is people's lack of intellect, that they can't see any nuance, that they, if you're bad completely. It's just
lack of intellect or lack of access to quality education. Because I think there's some really smart people who have been indoctrinated, and I think that it's been a systematic indoctrination as well as individuals grooming them.
Yeah, well, it's indoctrination, but I mean, some of these people are highly educated. Like, they've got lots of degrees and stuff like that, lawyers, doctors, there's all sorts of, so I think they're educated, but I from my perspective, intellect, and it doesn't matter what your class background is or how much education you've got, there is something about being able to exercise independent judgment, not being so open to being indoctrinated, to be able to see nuances, and that, the world, even though the media might, show us all these movies where there's goodies and baddies, I hate all those American movies, which it's always like that. It's always goodies and baddies. I mean, anything decent, any good story should have a little bit of nuance to show you that, bad people are not all bad and good people are not all good. And I think it's this problem, this very simplistic and superficial thinking that's got us into this mess.
The tribalism as well.
Yeah, that's right. Don't want to have a different opinion from your friends because, people are scared of being unpopular. I mean, I'm used to it. I've always been pretty unpopular. I don't care. Well, it's not true that I don't care, but I mean, I have had to think about this quite a bit. I think there's an advantage to it. What I've realized is an advantage. It is character building to have been unpopular, to know what it's like to have been marginalized. And this is really what it's about, the whole thing about disadvantaged groups and bullying and all of this. I do wonder, these people who think they're on the side of the disadvantaged minority, some of them, I look at them and think, have you ever been bullied? Have you actually ever experienced? Because, I have. And I think that's what makes me, that's why I do the work that I do, because, I do actually feel it's really wrong to marginalize someone and bully them. It's a very painful thing. And I wouldn't be doing this work if I thought that that's what I was doing. And I don't think so. I've worked alongside people who are trans, and I haven't treated them poorly or anything like that. So, it's nothing to do with that. This is a political issue by now. And, we're creating legal fictions which are creating a lot of harm to women and children especially.
And I don't understand how a middle-aged man who's gender confused is more important than, you know, a person who was abused as a child, or a woman who's been raped violently by a stranger and wants sex-specific recovery spaces. Like, I don't know why the trans, you know, is always, no matter what, ahead of any suffering that any woman has ever incurred. It's just so offensive.
Yeah. And there are solutions which actually you can balance these things without having to get everyone to undertake a mass delusion. You know, we all got to believe. I mean, for instance, there is a place for unisex toilets, not instead of women's toilets, but we've all, as if you've ever been a parent with children of the other sex, you know that it's awkward. It reaches a point where it's tricky, you know, and more unisex toilets. Women don't have enough toilets anyhow. Lots of venues, the women's toilet's always got a big queue. So, I mean, I think there's a pretty good argument that you could say we need to have more unisex toilets. We need men's toilets, women's toilets, and unisex toilets to cater for parents with children of the other sex, and also people who, for whatever other reason, maybe because they're trans, will experience discomfort in a women's or men's toilet. And I don't think it's, so there's a solution to that one: change rooms, toilets, you know. I think so. You know, there's a lot of these things, like even sporting competitions as well. I mean, there's people who are interested in sport, competing in a mixed sex sport, you know, so you could have it as an additional option, you know, in the Olympics, so that, you know, some women actually want to try competing against men to see, you know, because there's a few women who actually might actually have a chance. It's, you know, but I mean, you don't get rid of women's sport to provide that opportunity. So I think that they could have another category. I know in the, you know, amateur sport clubs, you do have mixed teams as well as girls teams and boys teams, and there's a place for each of these. So I think a lot of the problems are not really real problems. They're not that hard to solve, you know, if people actually have a will to try and balance the rights. But this is not what this is about. No. I think this is a men's rights movement. It's about dismantling feminism and taking control of women's reproduction, and I think it's actually pretty sinister. It's incredibly well orchestrated. It's done by people who really know what they're doing in terms of changing legislation and policy by stealth. It's just not about a timid minority group who's being persecuted. I'd be all in favour of helping that group. I'm not in favour of dismantling women's rights.
Can you tell us also a little bit about Women's Declaration International, how it's going? What are the plans?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we've been bullied into having to change our name, but I don't think it matters. You know, it irritates me. But this is how the legal system is used all the time to bully people. But anyhow, so we're now Women's Declaration International. That's a perfectly good name anyhow. I think it's going well. I mean, it's wonderful just to know we have that support base. There's so many different opportunities. I don't know if people are aware that there's quite a few different opportunities when you can engage, aside from the Saturday nights, which are really too late for us in Australia. I find I sleep through them. But we have our monthly one here in Australia. We have a monthly webinar. People aren't aware of that. But there's also the feminist perspectives that's on Sunday evening. I miss a lot of these. I mainly try to attend the country contact meeting and the legal working group meeting, but I think there's a few other opportunities. Some of you might, I think we should get a list of these. I'll have to ask Joe or Kath or someone to send a list of the, you know, the various times and days when people can engage, because there's quite a few different ones by now, I think, isn't there, for activists? Yeah. So I think there's the moral support side, and then there's various groups who are planning things. And we had a meeting the other day to discuss all the things that we need to do. I mean, in terms of keeping track of what's happening, you know, from my perspective, I'm very interested in the things that are happening on the legal front, you know, in terms of the cases that are happening internationally, the court cases, just keeping tabs with movement of those cases and decisions that are being made by United Nations bodies, things like that.
Women's Declaration International, are you getting a voice with the UN yet? Are you acknowledged yet?
I think that they've applied for ECOSOC accreditation. Actually, so is Feminist Legal Clinic, come think, but I haven't heard back. So that'll be interesting. So that's a bit of a process and takes a while, but that's a good point. You need to follow up on that. So that's what you do if you want to be able to, as an NGO, get a table a chair at the table. So I think they've certainly applied for that. You'd be aware that I think last year we attended the CSW NGO forum, and we did have a stall, and a few of us spoke, but eventually got evicted. So there's lots of ways to get a voice. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for people to write reports. So, for instance, there's a regular reporting process for CDOR, as there is for CSW, and really any NGO can write a report to these things. You just send it in. It's just a matter of keeping tabs on the reporting cycle. So I do urge, when I meet with the international group, I'm always urging them that we should be putting in reports from each country to the extent that we can. I mean, there are a lot of countries represented in Women's Declaration International in the group. Some people have the ability to do that, and others might not be across that, but I've certainly shared our efforts in that area, and hopefully people are doing that, I hope. When their country is having to report to CEDAW, that they're putting in a report from a radical feminist perspective. That needs to be done as often as possible. But yeah, we're all volunteers. It's all about very limited resources and what people can manage.
Yeah. I had a question ticking over. What was it? Oh, yes, Lawfare. I have the impression that it's going to be, unfortunately, individual women taking legal action that's going to get stories in the paper. It's going to raise awareness, and it's going to set precedents here in Australia. What do you think?
Well, it's happening all the time, although too often we're defending cases. But I mean, as you know, we've got the one in Tasmania. That was one that Jessica Hoyle initiated. Some of the complications with it, there's a lot of cases going on which I really wish we could get more publicity for, but the trouble is sometimes you've got things like non-publication orders, or you're not allowed to. And another thing is, sometimes for the clients, even when it's all over and sometimes you've been successful, but then the client thinks, having gone through it, and it's pretty harrowing often, is that they then think, oh, if I go public with this, I might suffer reprisals. Like, for instance, I helped one health professional with some disciplinary proceedings, and she wanted to go public originally, but then by the time it was all over, she didn't want to prejudice the proceedings, and she was sort of successful. They kind of backed away. But the thing is, she then thought, well, she kind of, I don't want to reveal her identity, but she had a number of clinics, right? And she thought, well, they might actually set fire to my clinics or something like this. So it gets rather complicated. And that's just one example. Unfortunately, much as I'd like to publicise the cases, you have to consider the individual. And if you look at Beth Rep, who was very brave, and the only reason we didn't get more publicity for that was we actually had non-publication orders put on it. And then even her crowdfunder, we had to take it down because the tribunal, which was quite extreme and I think very wrong, took the view that could be regarded as breaching their orders. So really problematic. And look, Beth was very brave and out there, but it did impact on her. I mean, it did affect her employment, and it's a lot to expect from an individual. So it's easy to be like gung-ho, oh yeah, let's take it. But these things, they drag on for years often, and yeah, there's all sorts of risks and difficulties attached to it. So yeah.
And I'm not sure if you know, but I've been doxed, stalked, harassed, had my identity stolen, defamed, had horrific abuse published about my brother and my children by an individual who we know the identity of, but they're using fake accounts, and they're using my pictures of me and my brother and his other victims in order to stalk myself and public figures. It's been in the legal system for 4 years. It's been going on for over 4 years. And on Monday is a 2-day trial that we hope to establish that this person and the troll account are one and the same. Throughout the whole thing, the biggest complications I've faced is lack of money for legal resources, because they are incredibly expensive. And the other thing that I faced is victim blaming from police, who think that the worst kind of doxing and stalking you can imagine is a little social media argument. Now, I had things about me come up. If you put my name and suburb into Google, it would come up that I was in a sexual relationship with my own brother, who is disabled and lives in a nursing home, and that my son has autism because of that, with our names, our photographs, and big red writing of retard over my then 3-year-old son. Like, we took, he was contacting my workplace. I had to take my work, because I'm self-employed. I had to take my workplace off the internet, so I've lost 10 grand worth of sales every year, and this is over 4 years. Like, all these incredible, awful things have happened, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. However, Stassja and I have been getting threatened by someone on social media for misgendering, and he's threatened to take me to a tribunal, and I would go through it all again. Well, I would.
Are you represented in this trial you've got coming up next week?
Yes, I'm represented, but the barrier we face is that even though I've got a personal safety protection order on this person, because they use troll accounts to defame and defraud. And the irony is, I was told by Victoria Police to get off social media, which I did, and the person escalated and then started attacking politicians using my name. So then I did look like a right-wing bigot, because me, with my photo and name, was calling Green senators and Labor senators expletives that I would never use, right? So the escalation happened, and I actually got this order and all this stuff. But yeah, like, having been through your worst nightmare, I would do it again for this issue of defending reality, because the worst thing about what I've been through is being victim blamed and having my reality of the trauma that this kind of doxing causes denied. And so when women say to me, I am too afraid to speak up on trans activism because I'll be doxed and my family will be attacked. I've been through that. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and I understand why they don't speak up.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, for me, it was worth it, because I was told to shut up. I didn't have a voice. The crimes being committed against me weren't important because I'm not a public figure. I had police just dismiss me, say I wasn't worthy of victims of crime compensation, even though I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a whole bunch of awful things happened out of it. And because I was told to get off social media, I thought, no, I'm not going to. And this horrible political climate for women, in which trans activism has completely denied us of our voice, kind of mirrors what's happened to me in my personal capacity. And it's given me a really, really, really good opportunity to fight back on behalf of all those women who are voiceless and all those kids who are voiceless. And so in a way, being beaten and trod on and defamed and defrauded and having my identity stolen has turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I think in the case of some of the victims of these, thought crimes, that's what's going to happen for them after the process is over and they've had a chance to recover and be free. Something sort of happens where if it doesn't kill you, it makes you so much stronger, and I hope that for other victims. And I hope that for people who weigh it up and go, should I speak out? Should I speak out? And they actually do. And there are bad consequences. But afterwards, we've had guests on here who've had abuse and been doxed and stuff, and they've all said, it's made me better. It's made me stronger. It's made me fiercer, and it's good. It's good to hear that. I need to hear that, because there's been times where I just haven't wanted to get out of bed. And here I am with my henna eyebrows talking to you guys in my tracky pants. And, and all of a sudden we've got like 600 people following us. So I'd be surprised if there was 6. It's been really healing for me, and for people around me, because I could, because I'm able to give them that example that I've lived through the nightmare, yeah. And
the thing is, you're a warrior, and I mean, and not everyone has it, and we have to be a bit understanding that not everyone does it. But I mean, yes, I mean, if only we had more women who had that courage, this wouldn't be happening.
I don't think it's courage. I think you just get beaten down so much. And when this is what's so offensive to me, when when my father-in-law is a trans identifying woman, he came out at 65 years old. And he is a more oppressed woman than me, who has experienced all of the you know, and that big list that psychologists scroll out, if you have, you know, 3 of these, you may have, you know, depression or PTSD, and I've got 30, you know, of all the abuses and the financial stuff. The only thing I don't have is, you know, race, but then I'm Jewish, but, you know, but I'm white, but you know what I mean? Like on the tick of oppressions, you know, I've looked at most of them in my life. And that's why this whole trans thing stinks, because nearly every rotten thing that's happened to me and every foot that's been on my neck have been from men.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
and that's where the rage comes, that this man tells me that he is him.
Mean. I mean, I think it's overwhelmingly the case that men are responsible for the violence in our society and the sexual crime. And I you know, it bothers me that even needs to be said. Is it so transparently the case that violence is, you know, is a male thing? Women can be very mean to each other. I mean, you know, like I don't shy away from that reality, but I mean, a lot of us are very scarred from our experiences with men.
But I think for me, I'm more scarred by, you know, having my experiences not be believed, not, you know, by the legal system, by the police, by the people that I reported crimes to when I was a child and an adolescent and a woman in my 20s, you know, like it's the not being believed that's more harrowing for me. So to be gaslit on a societal level and to be told that my abuser is exactly like me and eligible for all the same rights as me is highly, highly offensive to me. And that it gives me fire in my belly.
Yeah, look, I'd love to. I didn't know anything about your case, no. and I don't know if I should ask you about it here because I don't know, because, you know, I'd like to know what state it's in, what type of case. But I mean, maybe
it's fascinating. I've had it described as like Tiger King, right? It's like Gippsland's Tiger King, they call it. So it's a really, and you know, I will be speaking out to the media, and I will be, you know, speaking out about this after Monday. But you know, I think it's very relevant to what's happening here on a societal level.
Has there been any media coverage up till now?
Yeah, there has. The ABC did a podcast in the early stages, and my case was a feature of it, but that was, you know, really, really, really early stages.
All right. And can I ask what type of case is it? I mean,
it's only, this is actually a personal safety intervention order, but he is contesting it. He's contesting it, and it's bringing out a whole bunch of other stuff. And they've had, you know, they've been threatening to shoot me with firearms, and this person had, you know, some dodgy dealings with firearms. You know, they've got a scroll of previous offences and stuff like that police haven't, that he should have been convicted on, that would have prevented the level of abuse that I'm receiving now. And over the years before I even came on the scene, you know, law enforcement hasn't acted, and that's why I'm in the position that I'm in now.
Even these protection orders, I mean, I do a lot of domestic violence work separate from this, and it's, when you've got really bad perpetrators on the other side, they don't consent to the orders. I mean, that's right. The ordinary people, you know, the other side consents and it's all over. But I mean, these, and the police don't help. And then you've got this thing where it drags on for years and years, which is in itself a form of abuse, using the legal process. So, yeah, and it's the worst of the perpetrators who won't consent often, you know, that they drag the legal process out. And especially if I don't know if you're paying privately for your legal representation, but, you know, this is a way you can really make a woman pay. You know? You'll be impoverished. So I hope you're not having to pay private legal.
A bit of both.
Yeah,
but, you know, I've had a lot of women contact me that they're afraid of having IVOs put on them by trans activists for misgendering. Like they're using sock accounts, and, you know, they're absolutely paranoid about being doxxed and ending off either getting an IVO on them and having to fight it. So, you know, the legal system is certainly being weaponized. I was speaking to a police officer the other day, and he was saying that he successfully obtained a protection order for a trans activist who was being harassed by a former lover. And he said, you know, it was well deserved. Like this poor trans woman, you know, was being abused and doxxed and whatever. And so they put an order on them. And then the next day, this trans woman came with them with a list of people that she did not like, that they also wanted to put protection orders on, when there had been no like harm or threat or anything. It was just that it was a difference of opinion or something like that. So the legal system is clearly being abused by people for thought crimes, basically.
It's really frightening, because I don't know what state you're in, but you know, because we're going to start seeing women jailed shortly, because if they can get an AVO on someone for misgendering them, a breach of the AVO, breaches of AVOs are taken very seriously. And in the domestic violence context, I already see women being jailed for nothing, because the husband's got an AVO, just absolute rubbish, and then breaches them for, you know, having come near the house to get a mattress to sleep on or something. And I had one case like that. And then they put them in jail. There's some magistrates. So I haven't heard about anyone being jailed yet. But it's a real possibility. I see such crazy things happening in the domestic violence context. Women who haven't been violent, who are spending time in jail, leaving their children without their mother, even children, disabled children who need care. You know, there's crazy stuff happening in the court.
Well, we know parents have gone to jail for refusing to allow their child to transition in other countries.
In other countries, yeah. I just hope I'd hear about it. You know, like, this is the thing. I don't spend much time on social media, and listening to your experiences, I think it's a good thing. I maintain, you know, a website. I have to say I don't get terribly much flack. I've had one or two abusive things, and which I've kind of reported straight away. I didn't hear anything back. But on the other hand, it may be because I'm a legal service. But I know some other people, in a sense, I think they go for the low-hanging fruit. If they know that they, you know, have got a chance of intimidating people into submission.
I think we really need a Jessica Yarnev here in Australia to just demonstrate how ridiculous some of these laws are. I think it was
already happening. I've seen some pretty ridiculous stuff. I haven't quite seen waxing testicles yet, but I mean, we are getting ridiculous things.
Yeah. Look, sorry to end it so abruptly, but we're coming up on an hour, so I think we should leave it there. And Anna, we'll have to get you back on again at some point. You can tell us what needs to change in the legal system in general for women. I think that would be interesting for me, at least.
And I'd like to talk to you about the implications of prostitution being decriminalised as well. That's something that I'd like to talk about.
So much to talk about, and I have to catch up on your other TERF talks. I guess I'll find the links on the coalition Facebook. So this is what happens when you're not on social media. Lose touch. Yeah.
And if you're subscribed to our channel and you can go into view channel, all of them will come up in order. And the first few ones are a cracker. Oh.
Embarrassing, you have to admit. I just don't know where it is. I haven't looked.
I'll send you a link, Anna.
That'd be great, and I will check them out.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.